Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you so much for joining me this evening. We're going to have a great stream tonight. This is the celebration stream for 10,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. I just want to start out by thanking everybody who subscribes, everybody who tunes in. I really did not expect to get to this point this fast. I know for some people they're like, "Oh, well, that's not that fast." For me, I was very surprised, and I'm very grateful. I really appreciate everybody who's been watching, who's been sharing the content and everything. And so I just wanted to go ahead and have a celebration because 10K is a big milestone for a small channel like mine. And I just wanted to give you guys a chance to ask questions and talk and just kind of hang out, nothing too structured, nothing too serious. Just, I don't do a lot of kind of open free form question streams. It's usually an interview with a guest one on one. So wanted to give people the chance to do that and just kind of celebrate. I see some people like Skeptical Waves in the chat. Thanks for coming by. And Skeptical Waves, thanks so much for what you do. It makes part of what I do possible. I know a lot of people benefit from your channel. But my guest tonight, I'm going to be bringing back somebody who was here from the start of the channel, someone who I know a lot of my longtime subscribers really enjoy. I always get a request, when is American Ostrakon coming back? When can he, come back? When will we see him again? He's somebody who was always here from my early streams, and I know people really enjoy him. So, American Ostrakon, thanks for so much for coming on, man.
Hey, congratulations, Auron. I'm really happy to see the channel grow as quickly as it has. And it's a pleasure to be here as always. Hopefully I'll be able to my schedule work-wise is becoming a little more stable, so I look forward to being a little more involved in the future if you'll have me.
Yeah, yeah. No, glad you've returned from adventures and can once again join us. I see Academic Agent is here. So again, thanks guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope we're gonna have a good time tonight. Just like I said, we'll be taking your questions here in a moment. But as people kind of come in and get ready and start loading up questions, I wanted to go ahead and talk with Ostrakon about something that he had mentioned to me, and it's something I wanted to address too, because I think everyone has noticed, obviously, with the amount of just kind of ridiculous. We got vax mandates. We've got political purges of the military, which is something you and I have talked about a lot, and something that we've both kind of discussed in private is kind of how much the system can degrade before this becomes a real problem. Like how much can you go through this process of replacing valuable, capable people with just kind of sycophants with true believers? How long can you go through this process through so until it eventually breaks down? I know that was something you were talking about. Do you want to expand a little more about that, Ostrakon?
Yeah, so like you say, I mean, partially, let's say, due to vaccine mandates and partially due to let's call it cancel culture, let's call it the Me Too movement. Um, you've got people in positions of significant authority and responsibility who have been marginalized for multiple reasons, right? They don't fall under the correct political party, or they don't or the way that they're acting at work has now been deemed inappropriate, or they refuse to take the vaccination for whatever reason. Like I'm not debating the morality of whether or not you should have a vaccination or not, but the fact is there's a lot of fields where if you choose not to get vaccinated, then they've chosen to let you go or you're going to get fired. But at some point, right, okay, fine, not to demean um labor, certain portions of the labor market, like that are easily replaceable, but okay, fine. You can get away with that when it comes to people working in restaurants, or people working people working in warehouses. Unfortunately, they've always had that issue where they've been so-called easily replaceable. But you're seeing, of course, now that the labor market is actually starting to cater to these individuals. But more I'm talking about is skilled labor, right? Doctors or military personnel, or the engineers, the mechanics, the truck drivers. These are all skilled labor positions that are not people you can just replace after a 2-week training course and have somebody else plug and play. And at what point um, can you just get rid of anyone you disagree with and still have the system function, the logistics system, the medical system, the military system in our country? At some point, you can only bend the bow so far and still maintain a functional society. And I'm wondering what that limit is, because it feels like we're getting close to it. I could be wrong, but just it's the logistics problems. It's if you're looking globally, China and Russia becoming much more aggressive in their spheres of influence. Like at some point, something's got to budge, and you have to maintain a functional government in a functional country, or or we won't. And I'm really concerned about what that may lead to.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's interesting because of where we're seeing the failure points first, right? So it's not necessarily where you would think. A lot of people would focus on the top, right? And in many ways, you should already realize that the top has failed in a lot of ways, right? The inability of the professional class to do their jobs because they're paralyzed by kind of wokeness and vaccine mandates and all this stuff. This has been happening for years, but now it's because it's harder and harder, like you said, to pretend it's not happening, because those points aren't just happening like in the university or the education system or the media. They're now happening very close to where people live, right? That your food is not arriving on time, parts for your car, gas prices are skyrocketing, planes are not taking off on time due to vax mandates. And so it's the day-to-day people, the people who are in, not just the working class, but like you said, kind of that middle class that is key to the function, where it's, they're not just people who got a college degree and sit, in some kind of email job, but they're also not completely replaceable, trainable in a week people either. We're losing a lot of those people: mechanics, trained operators of vehicles, that kind of thing.
Doctors, pilots,
Sure.
these are, like you say, these are not professionals that are easily replaceable.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting that you're seeing that class of people fall out, but then also we are seeing, I think, the working class fall out, because it's so hard to find people to fill those jobs. A, because the pay has not increased along with the cost of living, so people are just not willing to do them. And B, because the people who would fill them are, increasingly given these low tier degrees. They think they're better than these jobs, and so there's just no one to step into those roles. We see a lot of stories of businesses having to ship people out of their corporate center back to like their warehouses to try to drive forklifts. I think it was John Deere who had this happen, because like they just can't make their business run. They have too many people with, some kind of bachelor's of arts and no one who can operate a forklift. But another great example that just came about, showed up on Twitter today, which apparently defense officials are saying that the Oklahoma National Guard isn't complying with the vax mandate. And because they aren't, they might declare them as no longer a National Guard, but a militia. That's a pretty huge thing, right? Like, that's not. I mean, all of this is bad, not being able to get milk or not being able to get, car parts or being able to get planes off the ground. But when you're talking about sections of your military literally like being declared a militia instead of still under the military because they won't, comply with a vax mandate, that's playing with some pretty serious fire.
Yeah, it's concerning. So post 2001, um Right. The purpose of the National Guard is to perform services for that particular state, right? That's like the primary function of a National Guard. They fall under the purveyance of the governor, the respective governors of each state. They do not answer directly to the president, so it's almost the state army, right? Individual state army. And what's happened post 2001 is, in order to meet the demands of uh, the mission overseas to places like Afghanistan and Iraq, is they've basically been lent out to the federal government in order to complete the mission. But that's not their primary function, and I think the federal government has, or the president in this case, has kind of forgotten that, where the National Guards for so long have been doing federal missions, that um, they to have some sort of pushback from a governor saying, no, this is my army, this falls under my jurisdiction, and I will decide whether or not vaccine mandates are required. And so I really don't think that they're going to follow through with that threat of designating them as no longer part of the military. It would be unprecedented. But the mere fact that they're entertaining the idea is very concerning. And so it's setting up a situation that's not going to be favorable to anybody. You don't want, people can knock the National Guard all they want. You don't want, compared to the rest of everyone else in that state, a highly trained military group, um, whose legality is questionable. It seems like a recipe for bad decisions.
Well, it certainly seems like a recipe for, like I said, change. And I it's interesting because if you were in any way smart, like this is, everyone wants to pretend that the people in charge are just brilliant and they never make mistakes. And, I hear this all the time, that I'm crazy for saying that, things can go sideways, and that these people aren't going to, you can't keep running the country badly forever. Um, but when you look at this, this is an unforced error, right? These people don't need to make this kind of threat to get compliance from the National Guard. Stating it specifically in this way brings up the question you are posing, right? There's a million ways they could have said this, and putting your legitimacy of military, your monopoly on force, putting that in any way in question can't be worth whatever ideology you're pushing. But because they are so inept and because they are so dedicated to this ideology, they can't see what a mistake this is, how vulnerable it could leave them if people follow this threat.
It 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 doesn't bode well for anyone involved. It seems like a poor decision to 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 threaten the National Guard of Oklahoma with basically disenfranchisement, right? It's cancel culture, but for an entire state's worth of military, and that seems very concerning to me.
Yeah, that really gives you a crisis of the third century vibe, right? But
It does. It very much does. It's like, maybe we don't have random legions in the middle of the country that allegiances are taken away from them.
So one thing I also wanted to mention, I was thinking about turning to a video, but because you brought up this topic, I think it's the perfect time to talk about it. I was reminded this week about mold bugs. Curtis Yarvin's bit about nonsense as an organizing principle. And a lot of us look at the contradictions and the ridiculous things that people are expected to accept, the things that they must signal their assent to if they're going to stay in the mainstream, if they're going to stay in polite company. And we say, how can people do that? How can people pretend that things that aren't real, that have never been real, that have no basis in reality are real, and expect that to like hold together as a coalition? But one of the things that Curtis Yarvin says is that nonsense can actually be super valuable as an organizing principle because it almost serves as a uniform, right? If you can get someone to publicly announce something that is so obviously incorrect that any human being throughout history could observe it and see it, and you can get them to announce that and agree to it and bind together around that, well, that's quite the pledge of loyalty, right? That's almost more valuable than having them put on the uniform of a military. And so the interesting thing is how much the current elites seem to have gone down this path where putting on the uniform of nonsense is almost, in fact, it's not almost, it's definitely more important than the uniform of literally the United States military.
So I I have come to learn throughout my work, which is why I have not been talking very much to you lately, is that compliance with the requirements of the regime are much more important than competency of your job. So basically, towing the party line is infinitely more significant than actually doing a good job.
Yeah, and we see this at every level, and this is the Leninism, right? Where you're just replacing the competent with the loyal, and eventually that's going to have pretty devastating effects long term. The only question is, how slowly do you pay for that? At what point does it actually break? But that said, let me hit a couple of these
Yeah,
questions
let's
and
do it.
chats because they're starting to back up here. Narco Republican for $5. Thank you, sir. Been here since the beginning. Still remember the 5K stream. Keep up the good work, mate. Thanks so much, man. I know you've been around since the very beginning of my channel. I've always seen you in live streams, and I really appreciate your support. There's so many of you guys who have really been around for a very long time, and I really appreciate that. It's always great to have you around. Grats, Auron. Thank you so much, guys. Liam says to 100K. Yeah, right around the corner, right? You just get 10 and then we go straight to 100, no problem. But thank you so much. Let's see. I know there's a few more here that we're stacking up. Where'd my
Mm,
other?
By next week.
Yeah, no problem. Easy. All right, let's see. Paul Cornelius for $5 says, "What do you think about Dave Smith? He's getting pretty right wing. The Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party as an alternative to and way to destroy the Republican Party." So I don't know Dave Smith that well. I've seen some of his stuff. From what I understand, he's someone who is kind of, I guess, moving the right direction. But I really don't. I wouldn't be able to really speak intelligently about Dave Smith. Again, the Mises Caucus is certainly, as I understand it, better than most libertarians. But I don't have a lot of hope for the libertarians in general. I certainly don't see them replacing the Republican Party in American electoral politics at all. I really don't have a lot of faith in the replacing the party. I mean, don't get me wrong, Republicans are a disaster. You should not donate to them. You should not give them your time. But I really don't see the libertarians as just kind of coming through and cleaning house, because if nothing else, libertarians seem to have so many problems of their own. I know the Mises Caucus is better than other portions of the Libertarian Party, but it still seems like a pretty big ideological and just functional issue about how that would occur. Let's see. Um, Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker for $5. Thank you, sir. Last time I checked, the U.S. leaving millions of dollars of military equipment for local militias to assume control of is a classic American policy. I mean, yeah, you're hoping that's what occurs here. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but yes, obviously with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, we do know that unfortunately the people who are running the American government don't really care so much about winning, unfortunately, in many cases, and are willing to just leave not millions, right, billions of dollars, possibly trillions, in Afghanistan for people who were enemy combatants to pick up.
I mean, it's that whole situation is pretty disgusting in my opinion. I know I'm not the only one who shares that opinion, but to just I always knew we'd be leaving, but in the manner in which we left is just pretty reprehensible. No matter what perspective or what optics you look at, it, I mean that could we could sit here and talk for hours about the failures of American foreign policy in Afghanistan, but just to basically just put our hands up as like, well, whoops, I guess we're just going to leave billions of dollars worth of equipment. Obviously some of it will break down over time and not every piece of equipment is going to be functional, but what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is the really dangerous stuff that we left there is going to end up in the hands of organizations that are going to wish to do us harm, and it's going to be American made equipment that gets used in some of those situations. And yeah, that's a really depressing thought.
Which really sadly and ironically wouldn't be the first time that's happened in Afghanistan itself, right?
No, it would not be the first time that's happened within Afghanistan, but
Yeah.
I think we're going to have organizations that wish to do American interest harm using that equipment outside of Afghanistan.
Nope, definitely. Let's see. There was another one here I was going to highlight. Can't find it. Where did it go? Well, I'll just go to Zero Kev's question here. Thoughts on biological Leninism? The article pairs well with the HD8 or BDHOV conflict and technology communism and the Brown Scare from UR. It seems that Chris Rufo has caught on to the idea as well. Thank you for your donation, Zero Kev. Yeah, I mean, biological Leninism is kind of one of those classic articles. If you're not familiar with Spandrel's work, that's probably his major contribution, along with a few other things. And if you want more information on it, you should definitely go check out Charlemagne's channel. He did a couple, 2 or 3 videos, really laying that out and making it clear what that is and going in depth with the topic. I do think that you're seeing a lot of people kind of approach this from different ways. Like you said, Chris Rufo, and then James Lindsay has done kind of a scrub down version of this. Either way, they're kind of looking at. Uh, why I suddenly cannot remember the Italian gentleman's name. Uh, why can I not remember his name? Who did the Gramsci, yes, Antonio Gramsci, who explained that Leninism or that communism in the West was not going to work the way it had worked other places. You were never going to get the kind of the economic collapse, and basically people had been made to live too good in the West, and so you were never going to see this desperation of the proletariat that would then spark revolution. So the key then to moving communism into the West would be, instead of using kind of this economic driver, it would be a cultural driver. It would be replacing the natural elites of Western societies with people who are wholly dependent on kind of the communist ideal, or now more the progressive ideal. And so this would be the key, is by making the ideology the only prerequisite for moving into these ranks, into this hierarchy. You could make people who are completely dependent on you and your ideology. They would have to perpetuate it. They would have to keep it in power, because if it ever came out of power, then they would lose their position. And these people are going to be entirely loyal to you, which is great if you're trying to like overthrow the more natural hierarchy, but isn't so great if you're trying to like make your civilization function. And so that's just the bare bones, but there's a lot more to it if people want to get involved in it. And I think, of course, that's the reason a lot of people are picking that up, is because it's really hard to refute, which I think dovetails a lot into what we were just talking about there, Ostrakon.
No, I agree. It's at some point you can only have so many loyalists who don't actually know what they're doing with their job before the society ceases to function.
Absolutely. And guys, if you want to line up questions, if you want to super chat, that's great. I appreciate it, of course. But if you just want to ask questions, you can do that too. That'll make it easier for me to see them. But while we wait for a few more questions to roll in, I guess the big thing to talk about would be the Rittenhouse trial,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So we're in the second day of deliberations. They sent the jury home again. And I think that unfortunately, the defense was probably correct to attempt to ask for a mistrial without, or a mistrial without prejudice, dismiss the trial without prejudice. Um, because if you're into a second day of deliberation on a case that's that cut and dry, that means you probably have a jury that's waffling for reasons that are not whether or not they are sure that the person is guilty. And so I think that's why they asked for that mistrial. But what are your thoughts on kind of the current situation with the verdict?
So, where are you going to get jurors who don't already have their opinions formed on this situation? That's the real issue. It was so heavily publicized that you can ask for a mistrial, but I don't see much difference in having another jury in this case. There's there are very few people who don't know most of the details and have formed their opinion on this particular situation. So that's really it's going to be pretty difficult to have any sort of unbiased jury. Um, my guess would probably be it's a hung jury at this point, um, and it's and that's I mean I understand why he wants to ask for a mistrial and to have it tried again, but um, yeah, it's such a well publicized case. I don't know what's going to happen if it goes to trial again.
Yeah, it seems like they wouldn't let it escape that way for the reason you're describing, and also who knows pushing this down the road what that does. And that's the really sad thing, which is going to dovetail to I think Paul A's question here. He says, "What does the left think of self-defense? It seems like they don't actually believe in it." And I think the answer, Paul, is really simple. It's friend enemy. Your friends have the right to defend themselves. Your enemies don't. And they know with the media, they have the ability to basically order a hit on you and your neighborhood. They can direct the mob at you at any time. And if you disagree with them, if you're a juror who's sitting in the Rittenhouse trial and you disagree with the left, they can literally they can either make you unperson and make you unemployable and fire you if they think you chose the wrong thing, or they can literally just order a hit on you. And the media knows that, and I think they're pretty willing to do that, and that's why everyone's terrified. I don't see how there's any possibility that Rittenhouse has a fair trial at this point, like Ostrakon was saying.
It's the concept of fair is a concept that people who are right leaning need to throw out the window. There
Yeah,
is
that's
no
right.
It's this whole imagining if the situations were reversed. It's just don't even put it into your thinking. Accept it as that if you are not in line with those who are in power politically, then you will not receive due process. You will not receive a trial that is not biased against you from the beginning, and that falls into not just um, actual trials, but also or like when it comes to like an actual legal setting, but in any sort of setting, in the work setting, in a private setting, in a social setting, if you do not believe what they believe, you will already be their opinion will be stacked against you from the beginning. Accept it.
Yeah, I think the social censure has been there for a while, but the kind of blatant display with the legal system is what's shocking a lot of people. I mean, it's really simple.
It doesn't shock me.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me either, but it certainly shocks a lot of people. And here's the thing: if you look at the Rittenhouse video, if you know anything about the laws surrounding it, if you know anything about the situation, you know that Rittenhouse, it, he showed incredible restraint. He showed restraint that's almost superhuman, and aim that was almost superhuman. And his ability to only wound or kill people who were attempting to kill him was frankly amazing and captured on from multiple angles. If that is not enough to acquit someone in the name of self-defense, then there is no right to self-defense. That's really all there is to it.
If you fall on the wrong side of the political
Of
spectrum.
course, yes, absolutely. Let's see. Turnip Merchant says, ideal government form disregarding practicality. So that's a great question. I see this one a lot. And of course, practicality is usually the big barrier there, right? I'm gonna go with Demeistra's answer on this, which is the answer of a couple other people I respect, which is that really the form of government is gonna flow from kind of the people. It's the way it's the kind of the spirit of the nation, the spirit of the people is gonna have a large determining factor on what the ideal form of government is. I think one of the problems that purely functionalist type people, people who are completely too deep into systems, one of the fundamental mistakes they make is they think if they can just force people into the exact right system, then it just runs in perpetuity. And that was the problem with the American founding, right? This is one of the core problems with what Americans kind of became is in America, we believed once we set up this, perfect constitution with its amazing checks and balances and all these different systems that pitted themselves against each other, they would restrict tyranny. And then we said, okay, you just set that in motion, and then it's the neutral arbiter of your government. And really, you don't have to think about it anymore because the system is neutral and it just runs on this perfect machine.
The
But
system was being manipulated even before the founding fathers were dead.
right. Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it was being, um, you know, we've got, even you could argue even with, our President Washington, he could have stayed in power for the rest of his life. It's impressive that he chose not to, and set up that kind of two-term precedent. But it was being manipulated, from the very beginning, and depending on whose viewpoint you take, were you more in like Adams camp or Jefferson's camp as far as the nature of what the country should look like? You could argue even from the very beginning it was not what they intended.
Yeah, and so I think that's always the mistake is assuming that if you can just set up the proper system, then you don't really have to worry about your government anymore. Every generation has to take ownership of where their civilization is going to go. You never just to get to be asleep at the wheel, and if you do, then the worst people in your society are going to take charge. I certainly have preferences. I do think pure democracy is, of course, a absolute disaster. I think that's a serious problem. I think Mosca makes a pretty interesting and good case. I just did a video on that in recently about how basically the separation of powers in America failed because they they stopped representing different societal interests and they all just became part of the same bureaucracy. So we just expanded the franchise and made every part of the government basically electable to the point where originally would have been more one house of the Congress was going to be for the people, and then another one was going to be kind of for the aristocrats and the elites. Obviously, the president was going to represent more of the executive kingly function. Your courts again were going to be kind of representative of your priest class. But because these things weren't tied to any actual social forces in the United States, because the United States never really developed a true aristocracy, and obviously, judges are not priests, there's no real opposition because at the end of the day everyone was just elected. It's just whoever's the best at manipulating the populace into voting for them, and that was the only force in society that was in any way worth mastering anymore. So there I think Mosca does make an interesting case for a mixed system. I'm certainly much more warm to monarchy than I used to be, though I think the absolutist monarch people also get it wrong. I think that you want those different interests. You want power against power in some ways, because otherwise your state does become totalitarian. Whether that happens because it all falls under one absolute monarch, or because it all falls under demagogues, or oligarchs that are manipulating the voting populace. Either way, that is a serious issue. You also want something that's going to involve societal forces that care about more than just their own, you know, money or power. You want independent forces like the church that are able to dictate morality in your society. You don't just want it to all flow from kind of the one central government. So I would say that it is going to be dependent on, kind of each different people and civilization as what would be best. But that would be my thoughts. I don't know, Ostrakon, do you have a favorite government that you're going for? Or?
Um, I do. I think there's something to be said for a a constitutional monarchy, where you have a head of state. Um, but I mean, to say that in this day and age is seems blasphemous. um, I think we really don't live in any sort of democracy as we would see it on paper. We obviously live in an oligarchy, even to the point where the media is stating that isn't it about time the elites have a bigger say in our government, which is
that was
which
that
is
was
that one's impressive. I wish I had that particular article in front of me,
No, I
but
know exactly. I've tweeted it out a number of times. I know exactly what you're talking about. Though I will say this, and in full honesty, because I do run into a lot of Marxists and other people. I do converse with these people, and one thing that always drives me crazy is people who are like, I'm just going to abolish the ruling class, right? People who are like, yeah, we're going to level everything out, and then we're just going to abolish the ruling class, and then it'll all be fine. We're going to go, I'm the one person who knows what the working class wants and needs, and that's all that matters. I think it is healthy to acknowledge that a ruling class exists. I think it's essential. I think the fact that we don't do that in America is one of the problems. It's one of the reasons that our elites have been allowed to become so corrupt, is because they were able to obfuscate the fact that they were in charge in the first place, that they were elites. And so while I understand that it is ridiculous to say like the elites should have more power in that context, I think it would be healthier if we were just honest, in many ways,
I
that we.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Like, elites exist. I don't care so much that I am ruled by whoever. I just want the people who rule over me to be competent and good at their jobs. And I care less about the political system and more about the fact that the society or the state can function effectively against other states. I could
And
I
that
could I could care less about, pledging allegiance to this or that. I just want it to function.
and I think that's why, people who are reactionary, or subscribe to elite theory, I think are more honest about this situation, because they're just willing to say, yes, elites exist, they're always going to exist. We're not going to wipe out a ruling class, we're not going to level the playing field for all of humanity for
There
all
will
time. And
always be a ruling class, and that's
right.
fine.
So if we're
I
going to
just
have
want good
one,
ruling class.
exactly, let's make it competent. The fact that everyone has to pretend like the people have power, pretend, that's the problem. It's the ability to again obfuscate, the corruption, and launder it through this system where we pretend there are no elites and there are no rulers. That's the big issue. Cringe Walker again for $5. Thank you, sir. He says, if you've read Asimov's Foundation trilogy, what would you imagine America's Mule would be in the predicted decline? So I have not read Asimov's Foundation trilogy. I have started watching the TV show, which I think is interesting in many ways. It's pretty cringe. It's Reddit atheism, as one person put it, the TV show. Like math just solves all of our problems. But at the same time, I do think it is beautifully done. I do think it's interesting and engaging. But obviously, I've not gotten to. I think the mule is in the second book. I have not gotten there yet. So I am not familiar with enough with the storyline at this point to answer the question, though I hopefully will be more familiar, or just watching the show. Have you ever read the Foundation trilogy?
No, I'm sorry, I have not. I'm not familiar with it at all.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Cringe Walker. I wish we could give you a better answer. Hopefully, I'll know more soon. But at this point, all I can say is, while it is kind of cringe, I am enjoying the TV show, at least at the moment. I think it is very interestingly shot, at least. Let's
My
see. Oh,
my
go ahead.
pop culture has been severely lacking lately due to and my reading has been severely lacking due to my work schedule. But that should change.
All right, let's see. Zero Kev again for $5. Thank you very much, sir. How do you think the cathedral will try to manufacture a win if Rittenhouse is found not guilty or a mistrial is declared? Congrats on 10K, by the way. And yes, again, thank you guys. I want to say just again, I really appreciate everybody coming out and participating. I really appreciate all you guys subscribing. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing any of this. Without you guys, I never expected to be here this quickly, and I really appreciate it. So how will they manufacture a win out of this? I mean, in many ways, a not guilty verdict is basically a win, right? The guilty verdict is you know I don't know if they're wishing for what comes after a not guilty verdict, but the not guilty verdict writes its own storyline, right? They've already been pushing this idea, even though Kyle Rittenhouse was only involved in a confrontation with white people. There was no racial issue involved at all. It doesn't matter. Kyle Rittenhouse is the kind of person they don't like, and the other people were marching for BLM, so that's all that matters. And so they've already painted him as a white supremacist, even though again no evidence to that. I think he's even listed technically as Hispanic, but that's not the point. The point is they will manufacture this as a white privilege, someone getting off in America for fighting going out and Trump supporters shooting people who were fighting against racial injustice. It will facilitate additional riots, that kind of thing. I think it's pretty easy to see how they would see a not guilty verdict as just more fuel for the fire.
Yeah, if there is a not guilty verdict, um he'll be ostracized from a large section of American society. Now, to be honest, that may be a place he was never going to go anyway. But maybe there will be rioting. I don't see quite the same fervor in this particular case that I've seen in some of the others, where there's going to be fire set in the street if he's found not guilty. But he's already been tried and found guilty in the court of public opinion for a large majority of Americans, and so that's something that he's going to have to carry with him the rest of his life, regardless if he's found guilty or not guilty. But I worry. I really worry because it's one thing to have people judge you, but it's a very different thing to have your freedoms actually taken away and be placed into the prison system.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's going to be terrible either way, and that's the thing, right? Is like you said, I think it'd be much better if he was not guilty either way, because A, it's true, obviously, and B, it would be better for him materially and just physically and probably mentally and spiritually too. But like you said, he's doomed either way, and the media knows this. They know that, again, this is the thing about them, right? They can wield this against whoever they want. It doesn't matter what the verdict actually is, because Rittenhouse will never be able to travel without bodyguards another day in his life. Right. There's just no way. He'll never be safe anywhere he goes. He'll never be employable. I mean, with his celebrity status, maybe a big right wing organization or a news organization or something will
We'll
employ
take him
him.
under his wing, but
Right.
he will not be able to have a normal life regardless of the outcome of this trial.
And that's what they're looking for, because again,
Yep.
if this happens to Rittenhouse, and Rittenhouse again, the evidence is so clear, it couldn't be clearer. It just couldn't. It's amazing the level of documentation showing his innocence. I can't believe there are enough shots of him showing him being justified in his self-defense that and this is like a one in a lifetime event. So if they can do this to Rittenhouse with incontrovertible evidence of his innocence, they can certainly do it to someone who is just going on eyewitness testimony, right? And so it's not just going to be wielded against him; it'll be wielded against anyone in this situation going forward.
Yeah, it's if he's found guilty, it'll set a precedent that you will not go against the will of those in power. Period.
Yeah. No, self defense just doesn't exist as long as the people who attack you agree with the right people. But
Yeah.
let's see. Zeterant says, "Congratulations on 10K. Thank you very much. I appreciate it." Academic agent there in the comments saying Phil Collins flying the Elite Theory banner on Twitter. Just in case people don't know, academic agent loves to call me Phil Collins. I guess since I play the hits, so that's a running gag, but it's always funny. But yeah, man, doing my best out there, doing my best.
Phil
Uh,
Collins.
yeah, well, I think the inside joke was like I was spinning off and got a lot of followers on Twitter, and so like Phil Collins leaving Genesis and then like becoming bigger than Genesis.
Okay, I get
Um,
it. I get it.
so I think that was the joke, but it's always a good running. Yeah, I'm always dropping Phil Collins like gifs in the Twitter chats because of that.
Just you have another day in proverbial paradise, buddy.
So let's see. Bolero 393, Ostrakon, come forth and become our warrior king. Auron, congratulations on 10K.
I'm too tired, man. Like I want to pull a Cincinnatus.
That's
I and I'm not going to finish that. But
yeah.
no, the goal is to work and then most likely retire someplace outside of the United States, someplace in a quiet part of the world, at least until everything is actually on fire. And at that point, well, we all got bigger problems.
Yeah, no, unless the purple is thrust upon you. I mean, who knows? You know, it's
I think there are better men out there, but you know
when the legions find you. I mean, who are you to refuse the crown, right?
that's at some point it won't be my decision, but for now, I definitely don't seek it. That's for sure. It's
Let's see. At Polish ambassador, we'll let them conscript you for the monarchy later here.
I mean, I've been re-going through the history of Rome, and there are certain generals who were basically, "Hey, we're going to burn your house down if you don't go lead us,"
That's absolutely what happened many times over.
which I find very funny. It's like,
Yeah,
no, you will lead us, or we're going to murder you. It's like, well, what
that
kind of
yes.
choice does that give
Wait,
me?
I don't want to be emperor. Too bad.
It's like,
You
no,
will
no,
be
we trust you.
yeah, you will be marching on Rome whether you want to
It's
or
like,
not.
oh God, I'm tired. I got arthritis in my shoulders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Greatness thrust upon you. All right,
Uh,
so Polish ambassador donation there. Thank you very much, sir. Again, thank you guys so much for your donations. A separation of church and state has been a disaster. No official compass on when states should be judged. Yeah, demon seething in is nation building. So I think that the short answer is separation of church and state never existed, right?
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
there's no such thing as a secular state. There is a place where you can deny metaphysical truth and require that all moral reasoning be done without reference to it, but then it will reference something else. And whatever you are referencing will be your religion.
I
Everyone is
mean,
governed by a church. End of the day.
yeah, it's one of my favorite jokes from Futurama is "All hail the great atheismo." We humans are spiritual beings, and we crave um, spiritual fulfillment in our lives. And if it's not provided to us by a unofficial or like a religion as we consider it a religion, we will fill it with something. It doesn't matter. Like we can fill it with atheism, but we will turn atheism into a religion. We will fill it with we will fill it with our hobbies. We will fill it with our pastimes, but we all have a religion.
Yeah, and the decisions are always being made according to someone's morality, and that's the real problem. Is liberalism attempted to just shove all the big questions of morality to the side and say, okay, well, we can all agree on these like bare minimum things about morality, and that'll be enough for everyone to get along with, and we don't have to actually like have the conflict about like the big questions. But that didn't work out, because it turns out that even those basic moral principles come from somewhere, right? They don't just appear in the ether. Those basic moral principles are derived from somewhere. Many of them were derived from Christianity, but once you sever it from the actual Christian teachings, the actual religion, they quickly start mutating into something far more horrific. And so we just see that there's no real separation of church and state. There's only the delusion that you can create a secular space.
It doesn't exist. We will always have a state with a religion, regardless of what that religion is.
All right, and then Cringewalker fills us in more on the Asimov issue. An Asimov mule is someone outside the parameter of decline who manipulates them to establish their own estate. Think the rise of the Franks in decline. Okay, interesting. So would there be someone from outside the parameters of the decline that would benefit? I would say the biggest problem for that would be the current dependence that almost the entire world has on the American empire, right? There's most of the nations that we think of advanced are pretty heavily dependent on kind of the Pax Americana that
We
exists in the United States, or with the United States.
we subsidize world peace. I
Not
mean,
just
you can say, you can
world stability
question
is probably a
world.
better way to
Sorry,
put that.
world peace is probably not the right world.
Yeah.
We subsidize world stability. Now you can say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the fact remains is that our military and our intelligence and our State Department presence around the world stabilizes the world. Now, when you remove that and we look inward, as we've been doing, you find that the regional players, the big ones are, of course, Russia and China, but there are others as well. The regional players exert their influence within their spheres of influence, right? Russia's back on its tear with the Ukraine and claiming more territory, and of course China is very much focused on Taiwan, which is a very real concern to the stability of the American empire. Um, and so when you remove that stability, or you attempt to remove that stability, is what we've been doing by taking away competent people from those posts that need to be there. um, we're gonna see the American empire as it is decline even further. It's a vicious cycle. You have to have competent people to deal with these international problems, and we're getting away from that more and more.
Yeah, but to be honest, and I want to say this carefully, because I'm someone who cares a lot about the country and obviously respects those that serve it faithfully and honorably a lot. Obviously you're one of my closest friends, and I grew up in a military family, and but at the same time, in many ways, it would probably be best if the American empire did not have the reach it had. And I know that brings a lot of stability issues in, but unfortunately, a lot of the poison that is allowed at home exists because of America's ability to kind of export a lot of that abroad. Um,
I'm not
I
so much
yeah,
talking about the morality of it, or whether
yeah,
or
yeah,
not
I understand.
it's more about these are the facts of life, right?
Sure.
When you lose American hegemony overseas, you are going to create situations for instability where a lot of people's lives are going to be put at risk. That's fact.
Yeah, none of it
And
happens in a vacuum. It's very true.
right. So as much as we can sit here and debate and talk about the manner of which the United States needs to function internally, but while we may be, let's say, the largest player in the international political game, we are most certainly not the only player. And issues at home regards to, again, not so much what political system we have, but more how competent people are in those positions of power, which we're running into, they're becoming less and less competent, is going to cause real world conflict that is going to cost people's lives.
I think that's true. I think, unfortunately, it's also kind of unavoidable at this point. I don't. I think much of the reason that the incompetence has been allowed to grow for so long is kind of the manner in which these people operate the system. And that the system has given them the strength and the arrogance, frankly, to think that they can turn over the entire military and still run the empire without a problem, right?
I mean, this is what we're running into.
Yeah.
My question is, and like I said, my question is at what point does it just cease to function? At what point do the aircraft no longer have efficiency ratings to fly the missions because you sent your mechanics to um, you know some sort of
Diversity training instead of,
diversity
yeah.
training as opposed to actually doing their job as airplane mechanics? At what point do infantrymen no longer know how to fire their weapons effectively enough because you've sent them to critical race theory training? I don't need soldiers and airmen and sailors to be political officers. I need these men and women, or we need these men and women to function in their jobs effectively as warfighters. And it's we're moving further and further away from it.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. I think I saw a few months ago a story where, like, basically, we had to start reverse engineering different functions of like stealth bombers and stuff because like we just didn't know how they worked anymore.
I mean, that's terrifying.
Yeah, well,
It's
it's Warhammer 40K, right? Like
right. The machine priests
yeah,
need to
there's no one,
consult.
right? There's no one who actually understands how it functions. There's only a few people with the competence to like keep the things that do exist going, and those are fading away by the day.
And I know, just due to the life I've lived, I tend not to focus on the internal politics of the United States. I've definitely, my observation is much more how the United States functions on the world stage. But when you look at the other world players out there, they don't have the same um restrictions that we do. As far as the Chinese are not concerned about uh of course everyone's a member of the party in China, but the Chinese are less concerned about what a man might say to a woman in an office setting than they are about whether or not that individual is good at their job. Like they're not shackled by the same restrictions we are, and I can guarantee you they care a lot more about competence than about um, trying to further the political agenda when it comes to those people who are their warfighters and support their warfighters.
Well, because they already completely control the
Well, they
political
already
agenda. Which
correct.
which there's, that's there's something to be said about not having political disagreement crippling your country,
Right.
not having a constant struggle. This is one of the problems of democracy that, again, Curtis Yarvin and so many have harped on, is when there is loose power around all the time, the only thing that matters is securing it. And people care far more about securing the power than they do about solving problems. So every disagreement about how to solve a problem is no longer about how to solve the problem. It's about how to rule. It's about how to win.
I mean,
And yeah.
give me a Mark Antony, who's a monster in any way you look at him, but an effective one. Like at some point, the politics, I don't care anymore. I just need people who can actually do their jobs.
So Felix Fairmont for $5 says, "Keep it up, you guys. May God bless you and fill us with vigor to endure what may come." Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the donation. And yeah, guys, I hope you do. Don't take away. I know we're not always giving the most uplifting answers to, or predictions, I guess I should say, um, when we're talking. But do make sure that you have things in your life that matter. Make sure your relationship with God is good. Make sure you're bettering yourself physically and mentally. Make sure that you're building good relationships with your family and that you are looking for ways to improve, because that's the stuff that's going to get you through a lot of this. You may not be able to look to, the American government or, whatever to to make things in your life better. It may be strictly making things worse, but there are still good things, and you should be pursuing them, and they are the things that are going to help you kind of move through it forward no matter what comes.
Yep. Make your bed, lift your weights,
Yep.
Clean your room, have a good book to read. It's the everyday things you do in your personal life that are going to make you successful. And at some point, we have to acknowledge the fact that we have very little control over what happens to us, and all we can really do is be prepared when things do happen to us as best we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, pull up, it's not the best it's not the best answer overall for society, but it is the best answer for your personal life. So just keep
What
that in mind.
academic agent? What kind of question is this?
Well,
What?
so
What's this is the
so
most open-ended question I've ever seen. What can be done about the media?
so the reason I brought this one up is that I have
He's
seen
just messing with you.
well, kind of. So he knows how I feel about the question, but also I think it's interesting because especially with the way the Rittenhouse evidence has been handled, the way that the media has just been shamelessly creating headlines that have nothing to do with the actual events in the Rittenhouse trial, but instead has just been completely manufacturing storylines without a shred of truth to them. A number of conservative and right wing commentators have kind of been saying, like, people need to go to jail for people in the media need to go to jail for what they're doing. The media incited the initial BLM riot in Kenosha. They lied about the events of a man who had a restraining order, had sexually assaulted the woman in question, was threatening the children of the woman, was armed. They lied about all of this, and they did so in order to incite a riot that fit a narrative of black suspects being shot without reason by police officers. That was the initiating thing that happened. And then obviously then the further lies about Rittenhouse. You saw a number of blue check liberals actually come out in the last week or two and admit, like, I didn't know everyone involved was white. They had a number of very far left people come out and say, I think it was Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks, and another woman who's involved in the New York Times, say, I've been watching about the events of this trial for over a year, and I did not know that everyone involved was white. I thought he had shot a bunch of black protesters. That's how much the media has lied. That's how much the story has been manipulated. That's how much the animosity has been stoked. And when the conservative commentators have gotten to the point where they're saying people in the media need to go to jail for inciting violence, I think that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg for that question, at least. Let's see. Any other questions? Here, just scrolling through, guys. We're hitting an hour, so we're probably going to wind up soon. But if you have any questions, I'll try to get to them before we go here. I'm just scrolling. There's a lot of chat. Let's see. All right. America isn't an empire. It's akin to the Athenian League, allies and partners who are economically and military linked to America, whether they like it or not.
The Athenian League was an empire, though.
Right. Like I was going to say, I mean, I guess you can split hairs on the definition of empire here. I would say,
A confederated empire, a
yeah,
confederation empire.
right. This is always, anytime someone asks me, is the American, or, like, prove America's an empire, my go-to is always, all right, how many American military bases are in foreign countries, even those that are hostile?
Right.
How many foreign military bases are in the United States of America?
There are none.
Right. Like, I feel like that answers the question right away. Um, and in many
We
ways,
have outposts all over the world for the empire.
right. Yeah, I think that kind of open and shuts it. Like I said, you can call it, the American League if you prefer, but I mean, this is like the United Nations, right? That's not what it's for.
And I
That's
mean, and we have, I mean, let's call that the hard power of the empire. But like, look at the soft power. Look at you've got Kentucky Fried Chicken in the middle of Islamic totalitarian states. So
you have
it's
BLM marches in England.
right. Like
Right.
we don't just export our military power, we export our culture, we
Uh-huh.
export our food. Like if McDonald's isn't a soft version of an American embassy in foreign countries, then I don't know what is. Like for a
Yeah.
lot of people, yeah, I've traveled the world, and for a lot of people, these American companies are America to them.
Yeah.
They are their first and sometimes only exposure to America, and these are what people use to base their opinions on what America is. And
I
they're not wrong to necessarily do that.
I was gonna say I think American companies are increasingly what America is to Americans.
Right. No,
Uh,
I agree completely. I mean,
yeah.
like in Japan, like, you go to I bring up KFC again, but like they confused, I think it was, or and you can say I'm wrong, it's fine, but they basically confused the Colonel with Santa Claus, and so that's why everyone goes there. Like you have to book to go to KFC to eat there on Christmas in Japan.
Well, as I
Like,
understand it, that was a big piece of marketing. That was a marketing
yeah.
genius that the KFC was like, everyone wants to celebrate this American holiday they have no connection to. What if we connected it to American fast food? And so that's
And it
that's actually
worked.
how how they cemented that. Let's see. Machiavellius to go for $2. Good advice. I think he's referring to the kind of you know trust in God, build up a relationship with your family, better yourself kind of thing. And yeah, man, I mean, again, that's what it's all about. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for that. Let's see. Spaceman Spiff, how do you induce the enforcement arm of the cathedral to arrest the propaganda arm? Yeah, to be clear, I wasn't saying that's actually going to happen. A lot of people get confused when a lot of times when you're having this discussion on Twitter and other places, saying that these things should be on the table is a rhetorical tactic. Most of the right is still in a place where they are under the impression that the institutions of America will eventually come to their senses and they will work the way they're supposed to, and the problem will be solved. And that means that they usually want to fight with both hands tied behind their back because they say, well, we're the side that can't favor our friends and disfavor our enemies. That wouldn't be fair. And the reason that you employ that rhetoric is not to actually say, obviously, like the Joe Biden administration is not going to go out and jail journalists who disagree with it on or who do a bad job on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. They will jail journalists like Project Veritas founder, what's his name? Um, but he just had the federal government arrest him and take his private stuff and air all of the information he had and leak it out because he opposes the regime. So they will be happy to arrest opposing journalists, but again, it is all friend enemy distinction. It is not has nothing to do with the actual principle of the thing. And the reason you employ that kind of rhetoric is not to suggest that all of a sudden uh, Joe Biden is going to clean up the press. The reason is to make people understand that unfortunately those rules are broken and they're probably not going back together. You need to focus on how to win rather than to how to maintain principles of neutrality that are not going to come back. Let's see. Uh, Anakin Cringewalker again. Why don't we just all write to the judge's office? He cares about the media perspective, but without us showing our existence, he's afraid to intervene. I think so. Here's the thing about the judge in the Rittenhouse case. I think he seemed like someone who's pretty sympathetic. A lot of people were playing clips of him, quoting, Bible verses to explain how the law works. And, I think the ringtone on his phone was like, God bless the USA. He seemed like the kind of guy who's probably going to vote Trump if he's voting. But at the same time, I think that's the power of the media, right? Is it doesn't really matter what his personal beliefs are. He's got to go home. He's got to be safe in his home. His family has to be safe in his home. He has to keep his job. He has to keep his circle of friends. And so this is the power of the media. At any point, they can and will destroy his life if they disagree with him. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think that making your voice heard in a kind of democratic fashion solves anything for the judge at all, right? Like, I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that your voice can't cancel him. Your voice does not have the power that the press wields. It doesn't have the mob that it can use to threaten him and his loved ones with. And I think that's why he's going to always be attuned to that, and everyone's going to be attuned to that because everyone knows where the power actually is. It's pretty easy to see when you're honest about it.
He would be foolish not to act the way he's acting.
Right.
It would be foolish of him to put his neck out there on a system that he knows is going to not have his best interests at heart.
So Kay Lewis, $5 donations from California. If I can make it non-vax, so can you. No surrender. Discuss thoughts on living in California, please. So I've never been to California. Everything I would know about California would be entirely secondhand.
I think California is a really beautiful place. Like it's gorgeous. It's just got Californians in it.
Right. That's more or less what I hear from everyone in California. Amazing place to live if it wasn't for Californians. From what I know, it's not an easy place to make it, especially if you're making the kind of choices you are referencing, Kay Lewis. A lot of people tell me that we have to have people in blue states. We have to keep a presence in blue states. You have to be able to hold out there because that's where the power is. That's where the influence is. And if you abandon those places, you're basically abandoning the seats of power. That's probably some merit to that argument. But I have to live my life. I have to have, safety for my family and want them to grow up in a place that's not horrible and that's going to like poison them ideologically and, threaten them physically. I'm from the South anyway. I wouldn't be in California in any instance. But if anyone asks me about what they should do if they're in California, my honest answer is get out. I know many people try to stick it out, and if you can, and you think that that's worth your effort, then Godspeed. I wish you only the best. But if anyone's asking my personal advice on having a family in California, living in California, I would say get out of all the people's republics if you have the option. Let's see.
Monterey Bay is nice. I'll give it that.
All right. Skeptical Waves behind on the stream, but Garrett covers how the Pax Americana Empire of Peace and vassal states in Rise of Empires on my channel. Okay. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I've listened to I'm still getting my last couple chapters of the ruling class. I'm split between like 4 books right now, if I'm honest, but I'm finishing, and you should use Skeptical Waves channel for sure. He has lots of valuable stuff on there. So definitely check him out. He's doing invaluable work getting books you otherwise wouldn't find on audiobook and making them available to people. So definitely check that out if you want to hear more. Let's see. Applied virtue. What should right-wing intellectuals and commentators be doing at this time? So this is a great question. This is a really weird situation to be in. I did not, and I wanted to say something about this before we wrapped up. So thank you for asking that question. I did not start this channel with the intention of being in a position in any kind of movement or leadership or anything like that. I was literally just reading interesting stuff, and I like to explain things to people, and so I started channel and Twitter and everything, just doing that. That was the only thing I was interested in. I really did not expect anything else to come of it. Obviously, when you end up in these situations where you grow an audience, especially when you're commentating on things about life and your approaches and thoughts, people will expect then actions of leadership, and that's understandable. I guess that makes sense. But I don't, it's a difficult question to answer because I think in many ways it's something we're all wondering. What should we be building? What we know, what isn't fruitful at this point. We can see the failures of many mainstream conservative efforts and movements. We've gotten pretty good at pointing them out. This is one of the things that I have Twitter followers because of. But that's very different than building. Building is much harder. And so you do have people building. You have guys like Academic Agent building courses outside the mainstream that provide you valuable uh, information. They provide you valuable education. I think that's something that's really good and really worthwhile. I always think investing again in your own communities is really essential, but at some point then it grows beyond that, and I wish I had a better answer for that. I know another great service that Dr. Bennett is building, if you guys check him out on Twitter, is Exit. And that's a service that's about helping people who are canceled or are worried about being canceled. I think that's important that you have options for people who voice their opinion and disagree with those in charge to have networks that will help keep them employed. So I think that's a really valuable service that he's providing and something that's really worth building. Those would be my first two things that spring to mind that are valuable. There also are people looking at the possibility of like lawfare services to defend people who there are people who are looking to defend those that fall into these situations and need help legally. They need the assistance. A lot of these wins are easy for the regime because they control all the lawyers, and battling against them would be extremely expensive. But the more you can throw spanners in the works, the more you can force courts to say kind of things out loud, that can be really powerful. I would say those are the three things that spring to mind. But obviously, none of those are completely, those aren't answers that really solve the problem. They're really just things that we can kind of do in the meantime to protect people and improve things at least at some level, and provide alternatives.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to diagnose the illness than it is to find the cure.
Absolutely, and I think everyone knows that, and that's why everyone's looking for someone who has it. It's that is much harder, and I won't pretend to be the person who's solving all those problems. I'm doing the best with what I have, and I hope you know I hope that's a help to people. But I'm not going to sit here. I don't like people who sit around and pretend like they have all the answers. I don't like people who sit around and pretend like they're leading a movement somewhere and they're gonna fix all this. And I'm not going to pretend to be that person at all. But I do think it's important that people ask those questions that Applied Virtue is asking, because we do need to be working towards things that are a positive force, that are making gains beyond just criticism, which is something I'm aware of personally, but something I'm trying to consider here. Paul says, would national divorce, if it actually happened, diminish the power of the cathedral? Yeah, a fractioning of the United States would diminish the power of the cathedral. I think just like with discussing whether or not one section of the government would, imprison another section of the government, which is literally just journalists. Just like that, I think national divorce is more of a rhetorical tactic than it is a real suggestion. We know how states leaving the union works. We've seen that we've kind of seen that trick before. So uh, I don't think that's the actual direct answer. If there's going to be any kind of actual national divorce, I think it'll come as different regions of the empire, even just of the states, find it easier to operate without complying with the central government. I think you see the beginnings of it in places like Florida, and then in, was it Oklahoma? Yeah, Oklahoma, where you see this pushback by governors saying we're just not going to comply with these orders. We're just not going to do that. And that starts to, then people make decisions. Like, I know in Florida, Ron DeSantis is offering like police officers who get bumped because of vaccine policies, like a signing bonus to come and work there. He's basically like guaranteeing them jobs. Eventually, if those states just function better than other states by basically ignoring the rules handed to them by Washington, and Washington doesn't express an ability to actually bring them to heel, then we do see something interesting. Not really a national divorce, but more the slow degradation of an empire that can no longer control its satellites.
It makes the central government look foolish if particular states do not follow their mandates and then are seen to be actually more successful than those states that do, which is kind of what's happened in Florida, right? It's had the least restrictive COVID policy out of any state, and you're seeing that it's made a very little difference in the infection rates, regardless of whether or not, compared to states that have been much more restrictive in their COVID policy. So
Yeah,
all this effort and all these mandates have really made very little difference in the overall transmission of the disease.
yeah, there's a really entertaining flurry of tweets from bewildered blue check journalists who were posting like the COVID maps and saying, "Why are all the states that followed the CDC guidelines spiking with COVID, and all the ones that ignored them dropping?" I don't know, it's a mystery, buddy. Like, you just saw a number of them in line being like, how could this possibly be the case that all these states that like lock down their entire population for 8 months are seeing, and are forcing vaccinations through mandates, are seeing spikes, and all these places that didn't do that are seeing drops. And the real answer is probably the season, right? But it's just funny that they realize it's basically like, actually these policies didn't really do anything, and it was far more about the season than it was compliance with these policies. So yeah, I think that's true. Let's see. Cloudstar here for $10. Found you a few months ago from the Distributist. You're one of my favorite Twitter accounts that's not banned. Yes, thank you. And guys, make sure you're checking out, of course, the Distributist. Most of you probably know the Distributist before you knew about me. But the Distributist is definitely somebody who introduced me to a lot of this philosophy, inspired me to do a lot of what I'm doing. He's kind of one of the OG guys in this arena, and he's certainly someone you should have check out if for some reason you have not been doing that yet. Let's see.
I think we're about caught up. Oh, we got a few more.
Yeah, I'm going to wind it down, guys. I appreciate the questions and the super chats. You've been very generous, but we are approaching an hour and a half, and I don't want to monopolize everybody's time. So this is probably going to be our last one here, real quick, and then we'll wind it down. Let's see. Zero Kev says, should the right frame progressivism as imperialism, horseshoe theory, but Vietnamese communist Lunoy explains how to spot a color revolution and applied well to the 2020 riots. Yeah, I mean, progressivism is basically the foundational religion of the American empire at this point. In fact, that's I try to encourage people to see the difference between the empire and the country, because at this point, I think there really are two distinct things. The nation and the empire are just not the same thing, and so in some ways, it is useful to explain it in that way. Um, one of the issues with the color revolution, and I'll be honest, I'm not super up on all the terminology. Maybe Ostrakon is, but as I understand it, color revolutions are cultural revolutions put in place by people like the CIA to undermine existing regimes. What happened in the 2020 riots is a counter revolution. It's the opposite, right? The people who triggered the revolutions are the people in power. They were triggered to stop opposition to the regime. The mobs were turned loose to punish you for having the temerity to oppose what was going on. They are not in themselves a fight against those in power. Those who are being used that way think they are. They think they are unseating those in power, but they're tools of them. So again, I wouldn't want to lecture anyone on the use of color regime, but I don't think that's exactly the case.
Yeah, it's I woo, this is a question I require a little reading on to give you an accurate answer. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna give a lie as an answer because the answer on this one is just I need more research.
Yeah,
You know what?
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
do my research and get back to you.
Fair enough. Like I said, I don't have a complete grasp on that one, so I could be getting that wrong either, but I think that is generally how the term is used.
I'm
Um,
my knowledge of modern Far East politics or Southeast politics is or South Asian politics is not that great.
sure, yeah, no, same here. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank everybody again so much. It's been amazing to watch the channel grow. Like I said, I always hoped that things would go well, but I really didn't expect it to grow this fast. And you guys have been really great to just always have really big crowds for live streams, lots of responses, really interesting. And so I really appreciate it. I think it's awesome. I'm humbled by it, and just thank you so much for the opportunity. I do my best to provide something that I hope makes people think, and as sometimes the seriousness of the topic can be a little uh you know depressing, I guess, for people at times, but I hope overall what you take away from it is that there are important things that you can focus on, there are good things that you can focus on, there are things that are going to make your life better. And just because the current political situation is difficult or something does not mean you cannot have a good, fulfilling, meaningful life. So just please always keep that in mind. And I do want to also thank American Ostrakon again for coming on. Again, just an old school guest, someone who's been there from the beginning, lots of people asking him back. And so really great that he could come back again for this 10K stream.
It's a pleasure to be here as always, and like I said, I look forward to being a little more of an active participant in the future.
Absolutely. And always valuable perspective, lots of experience. So we'll definitely be doing that. All right, guys. So if for some reason you wandered in here to the celebration stream without being a subscriber, you can do that. All the links for my Twitter and my Odyssey and Rumble channels are in the description below. Make sure to especially the Odyssey channel. That's something that I think is really important, because just in case I'm ever not on YouTube for whatever reason, they sneeze and decide to get rid of me, everything I do is backed up on Odyssey, and that would probably become my main platform. So just make sure you're subbed over there just in case. So that's always there. And of course, if you want to donate or anything, the links for that are also below. Again, thank you so much for the generosity of super chatters today. Thanks so much for your question, guys. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.